Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the next installment of our 8.1 vodcast. It will be one of our last because we're going to be going through a big rebrand after Marbella. This is where myself, Jarvis Todd, the publisher of Telemedia News, Telemedia Online, and Telemedia Magazine, meet with the wordsmith Paul Skeldon, who's our editor-in-chief. Good morning, Paul.
Greetings.
Paul and I are going to run through three of the top stories that have come across his desk this week. We're going to be talking about payment services and content trends. Because as mobile content and services market grows and it trenches itself worldwide, so competition for eyeballs is intensifying. So ahead of Marbella, as I said, we're going to look at the trends and what trends we, in particular, those attendees should be aware of. Um, and particularly with a view to what's making consumers just that little bit more sticky, which of course is vital when it comes to keeping those services running, because obviously you spend a lot of money acquiring and engaging customers. You want to keep them, don't you, Paul?
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. And as you say, telemedia, sort of mobile content and services is becoming, huge everywhere, all over the world. Hence why we do all our events everywhere. But that from that means there's a lot of competition, and there's a huge amount of competition for the consumer base. So you have to have really good content. You have to have really good payment methods. You have to have really good sort of business and payment and subscription models, and that also takes in sort of apps and all sorts of things, and it has a huge impact on the whole telemedia value chain. And yeah, I pulled out three stories this week that kind of cover those three things, and they're all things that are going to be sort of heavily discussed at World Telemedia in Marbella, because we'll be looking at the content trends, we'll be looking at the sort of payment trends, and we'll be looking at the kind of marketing slash how do you keep people sticky trends, which involves content and payments. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at today.
Okay.
Nice little teaser, really nice little appetite wetter for the show that's in, I believe, 2 weeks' time, less
2 weeks
than ten
time.
days.
This time next week, it will all be over. No, this
No,
time,
week
2 weeks'
after,
time, it will all
week
be.
after.
Right. Well, you mentioned payments, so let's kick off with that one. The first story, talking about the possibility of having variable recurring payments, which of course would be a bit of a game changer. The story has come about as a result of Juniper Research's A2A payment markets report 2025 to 2023, which is available as a free download from this very website. And the headline goes that A2A payments to top $195 trillion by 2030, ushering in variable recurring payments and potentially a threat to DCB. Or maybe not a threat, but certainly you've mentioned that clearly additional, or we have mentioned in the past, additional payment mechanisms often are something to be sort of celebrated in that merchants can integrate them into their dashboards and hopefully increase the possibilities of onboarding because you're offering a variety of payment mechanisms. But I suppose the suggestion is that this will cannibalize or could cannibalize some DCB revenues. Why don't you dive into the story? And I think in particular, perhaps explain to everyone what the A2A payment scenario looks like, because we've
Mm.
talked about this, and this is a result of that whole kind of open banking explosion, which we got really excited about in 2023. Um, but as yet, we've sort of yet to see it being prominent, I would say,
Mm.
at World Telemedia.
Yes, we did do a lot. Yes, like you're saying about 2022, 2023 around open banking and this account to account payments, A2A payments, which is essentially sort of instant bank transfers. So the basic idea is that if you want to pay an ordinary person, you want to pay a merchant for something, content, service, whatever it is, the payment is done by paying from your banking app, from your bank account to their bank account. And because of instant banking, it's pretty much instant. And it is an exciting sort of alternative payment method for the telemedia services because the money moves instantly. So there's none of this waiting around for payouts and all that. And also it's a lot cheaper. Now, Juniper's research sort of predicts that these account to account payments are going to become enormous. And that, to be fair, is because they're looking at how payments are going to be done from account to account across the board. So not just for digital stuff, but for everything. But a big part of that is for digital content and services, and so on one level, A2A payments offer sort of merchant selling content and services another fairly seamless, easy way to pay. Great. The interesting thing that's buried in their report is this thing about variable recurring payments, which is because you're setting up the payment from your own banking app, you can do more with it. You can tell that app to do all sorts of things. And one of them is this idea that you can set up payments from it to pay variable amounts on a recurring basis. So it's like a subscription, but it doesn't have to be limited to being charged €5 a week or whatever. You can tell it what it is you want to pay. You can set limits. You can set sort of chunks, quantity limits, and all that kind of thing. And that is a really interesting sort of possibility for content services, because as we talked at the top of the podcast about competition and stickiness, subscriptions are one way of keeping people tied in, but even that can be a little bit sort of tricky. There's a lot of subscriptions. We all have lots of subscriptions to things. So you may not want to do that. You may cancel them on a whim because you think, oh, I just don't want to do that anymore. With this sort of way of paying, the consumer is much more in charge and can manage that better. So in theory, it could be a much more sticky way of getting consumers paying regular amounts to merchants. Now, obviously, that has a huge impact on telemedia players because it changes sort of the business model to some degree. And I think sort of most interestingly is it cuts out all sorts of things. It cuts out like the card companies, so there's no card fees, and it cuts out network operators, so there aren't any of those sorts of processing fees and revenue share. So it should or could potentially be a much more lucrative way of billing people. So one, it could be a lot easier for people with bank accounts to buy these things. Two, it increases subscriptions and therefore loyalty. And three, potentially it's a lot cheaper than any other way of paying, including credit cards. Now that
Yeah,
could be an issue for carrier billing. I
yeah.
think carrier billing is not going to go away because it's very convenient and it sort of suits the unbanked and all sorts of other things. But this is definitely, certainly in European markets where regulations are starting to be looked at around how to do variable payments like this. It is also it could change. It could be a really useful, interesting thing for banked users in Europe.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, well, as I said earlier, I mean, whilst it might cannibalize DCB as a payment mechanism, I don't necessarily see it as being bad news for the industry at all.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But as you quite rightly mentioned, of course, the derivatives, the derivative payment mechanisms that are coming out from the open banking opportunity, it's important to mention that really they are only going to work in more sort of developed
Mm.
countries where you do have sort of lots of cards, lots of bank accounts, and that kind of stuff. So there's no surprise that if you anyone wants to reference that article. They give you which country is spending the most via A2A payments in 2025. I must admit, I mean, of course, they're all very sort of developed markets, but I was quite surprised to see the UK number one by
Yes, but it's,
by quite a significant margin.
yeah, but we're much more advanced in terms of deploying open banking regulations in the UK. It's been really sort of pushed here by the banks, not just for this A2A payments or indeed the variable recurring payments, but just generally open banking is much more prevalent. With instant payments between accounts is, yeah, we've had it for a good few years now, and yeah, we're way ahead. And I think Juniper's theory is that that drives the market. We are ahead of the game in terms of doing this. Um,
So
so
it's nice to
yeah,
see the UK number one at something.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we possibly could be number one at these variable recurring payments because the sort of law or the regulations around payments in the UK to do with this are being looked at a more of an advanced stage here than they are elsewhere. But this whole variable recurring payment idea is something that, as you say, is much more a sort of interesting thing for sort of developedly banked markets. But that in itself is interesting because as well, people will find out at World Telemedia in Marbella, we've got a whole afternoon now dedicated to the European market because it's seeing a bit of a sort of renaissance because of things like new ways to pay, new regulatory environments that make things a bit easier to do. Things like in Germany where you can sort of have payment agent models where you can actually buy physical goods and all those kind of things. So Europe is suddenly becoming potentially an interesting developed telemedia market, and things like these recurring payments through A2A,
Mm.
will help drive that along. Absolutely. And that's why I think it's a really exciting and interesting story.
Mm. Yeah, no, I agree. And just for anyone that doesn't know, the forthcoming World Telemedia event will be in Marbella on the 5th, 6th, and 7th of October. It's looking like another record turnout. The exhibition is pretty much full, although if you're quick, you might be able to squeeze some last minute space out of us. Please go to wtevent.com to register for your event pass. And director's lunch, if indeed that's what you would like to do. And we look forward to seeing you in a few weeks' time in Marbella. Now, obviously, there's no point talking about payments unless we're talking about what you're actually going to be paying for. The telemedia industry is all about the sale, the marketing, and the delivery of digital content and services. And of course, that can come in many forms. We have referenced in the past the opportunities that the super app presents, more specifically referencing what we just talked about there in terms of subscription models. So why don't you dive into story two? Firstly, the headline goes, "Are super apps the antidote to subscription fatigue?" Why don't you kick off by firstly reminding us what the super app is, and then diving into the story a little bit deeper with regards to why this is positive when it comes to the sort of potential pushback from consumers when it comes to being offered subscription services.
Well, absolutely. Super apps are apps that do more than one thing. They're kind of big in China, particularly currently. Things like WeChat, where you can do a whole range of things. You can it's like you can search in it. You can sort of find merchants. It's a social media platform. It's a payment tool. Um, it does messaging. It's got a map function. You basically can do everything from WeChat. So you can sort of find a restaurant, book a table, invite your friends, talk about your meal while you're there on the social side of it, uploading photos and all the rest of it, and pay the bill all in one place. Now it's not a new idea. They've been around for quite a while. They've never really taken off to the same degree outside of Asia, really. But I think they still might, and it's the kind of thing that sort of X is trying to do, and Meta, Facebook is sort of trying to do, but it's never managed to quite bring all its disparate bits together into one place. But it's sort of essentially trying to. And the story I'm sort of referencing here is a sort of an opinion piece from Hamish White, who's CEO and founder of Mobilize, who has written a really interesting story for us about the role super apps could play in this sort of subscription fatigue and the content sort of marketing model for operators. Because as we said at the beginning, the whole thing it is very competitive. There's a lot of services, there's a lot of stuff, all competing for the same eyeballs. What super apps can potentially do is sort of consolidate that into one sort of offering that operators could put out. So they're essentially offering several different things, but all in one place through one app. That includes content sales, that includes payments through DCB or however else they want to do it. That just makes it that little bit more interesting, that little bit more likely to keep people in that single service and on their platform, which is really what this is all about: is how to get people in one place and keep them there as long as possible and get them to spend money. And one way of doing that potentially for telecoms operators the world over is to look at how to create some sort of super app, which means sort of extending their sort of DCB content play into something that's sort of a little bit more holistic and something that just looks a bit more user friendly. And it's it's an interesting idea. Again, it's sort of fairly hypothetical, but it's interesting that it's not really come about. There's a lot of potential money to be made in the super app market. Yeah, billions and billions of dollars. There's some figures in the story from Gartner about it. That it was a $61.3 billion industry in 2022. I mean, it's growing at 27.8% a year between then and 2030. It's a lot of opportunity, I think while we're talking about the fact that there's a need for competition, there's an increasing sort of link now between content, payments, marketing. I mean, all the stuff we cover in telemedia is those three things, and increasingly it's about how all those three things operate within each other and around each other, and how payments can also be a traffic generating tool, and content can be a way of driving people to payments and all that kind of stuff. And combining it all into one place is a potential way for operators to perhaps own those customers a bit more. It's an interesting idea, and again, something we're looking forward to talking to people about in the industry when we get out to Marbella.
So, is there any evidence? I noticed that in the story it talks about this is already sort of quite big in China, and as you
Mm.
just mentioned, not so much everywhere else. Is this something that is driven by the MNOs, or is it something that is going to be
In
paid?
China, it's not particularly. The opinion piece sort of posits the idea, the kind of model that's used by people like WeChat in China is something that operators should have a look at, because they can embed a range of digital services into this sort of one platform, uh, and make that part of their mobile plans for people. They can add in financial services, entertainment, travel booking, insurance. They can bring all these things together, all of which can be sort of revenue generating, as well as giving them a much sort of more sort of holistic sort of view of their customers. All that data is valuable. It becomes a marketing sort of commerce media play around that as well. It's just an interesting idea.
So this is really a big opportunity for whoever wants to put their hand up and become that sort of master aggregator.
I think so. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think absolutely, and it's something I think that could well be seen to play out not just in developed markets, as we were talking about with the payment side of things, but anywhere. And, I could see that this is the kind of thing you might see sort of springing up in say MENA, or one of the MENA markets, as someone looks to sort of take that next step sort of forward into sort of, well, how do we sort of extend what we're already doing with contents and payments
Mm.
into this sort of much more rounded offering.
Mm. Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting, certainly going forward into 2026. I mean, we've got a number of event plans coming to market, which we will talk about in sort of November, December. And I mean, one of the things we've noticed with our Dubai show in particular is we've got and would be expecting quite a significant number of MNOs to be at that event. And I guess this is going to be one of the topics of discussion, particularly for Dubai, given the locality and given the number of operators that seem to attend that particular event. So it's going to be fascinating to get some feedback from those guys and just see where we are with the super apps
Yeah,
story.
yeah. I think
Um,
it'll start slowly. It'll be one or two things being combined into an offering, but eventually this will grow out until you've got someone will reach that sort of critical mass and
mm,
explode with a super app.
mm. So, well, this episode has been very much focused on subscription. So let's just move forward a little bit and get straight to the sort of coalface and hear from one of the leading content aggregators in the space.
It's not
Um,
an aggravator.
who's going to be who's talking about a particular content trend that is really driving subscription revenues and keeping those customers coming back for more. And this is the advent of the micro drama format. And this is a story that's been put out by Julia DeMambro, the CEO of Seriously Fresh Media, who's explaining how micro dramas have rocketed to the top of the content charts for subscriber
Mm.
services. So, have you sampled any of these micro dramas yet?
Yeah, I have had a sort of dabble into some of them. There's hundreds of them, and I don't know. It's one of those things that sort of you sort of read about it and think, of course, why did no one think of this before? Because what it is, a very short ish sort of video dramas that play out on social media or on YouTube Shorts and that tell a story that are quite engaging and have a cliffhanger, so you keep coming back for more. And they're like all these things these days. They're very cleverly and well made to do that, and they're just driving like massive like market growth. I think I think Julia at Seriously Fresh has sort of got in on this sort of fairly early, but she gave us some statistics. So viewers in China average 90 plus minutes a day watching micro dramas, 30% more than traditional platforms, according to Statista. And they appear on things like Real Short, Drama Box. They reach 30 million people, 90 million subscribers across 200 countries.
Wow.
One of the titles that Julia runs, called The Day We Got Married, smashed 200,000 views in a week.
Wow.
And yeah, and the hook is clear. They're well made, they're quite fun, they're really short, and they leave you wanting more,
I'm
which
actually
is
really,
amazing.
yeah, I'm actually really surprised that this hasn't been
Mm.
a topic of discussion much earlier, because this
No,
is
me
not
too.
in itself a new idea. I mean, I think yesterday in the UK we were celebrating, was it 50 years of the first advert being shown
Oh, yes, it was,
on
wasn't it?
commercial television, and they identified some of the most successful ad campaigns in history. And of course, there were numerous examples. I mean, not everyone will know what I'm talking about, but the Nescafe Gold Blend, which
Mm.
was,
Well, the micro drama.
I mean, and those ads were 30 to 45 seconds long, and yet they became viewing events in their own right, and the characters developed, and it became an obsession for people. So, even back then, before we were talking about people's, consumers having a short attention span, the proof was actually in the pudding back in the 70s with
Mm.
some of those ads. So it is quite surprising that this hasn't become a, or a thing, or maybe it has and we just haven't really heard about it. But it makes perfect sense to me. And again, as we've talked about, the younger, higher tech consumer is snacking. They do, they're obsessed with reels and video
Mm.
shorts and that kind of stuff. So why wouldn't you develop a format that fitted into the kind of viewing habits, particularly of the Gen Zs and the Gen,
Well, yeah, I think I mean it is. I read it and thought of course, and you're absolutely right about advertisers. Some advertising campaigns have done this similar idea for years, but I think what it is bringing. I think it's a sort of natural evolution from sort of like humorous cat videos on YouTube Shorts to if you watch them, they do increasingly get a bit more narrative led, even if they're sort of gags or pranks or whatever. This is like the natural next step. Let's make a short, really compelling drama with a with a cliffhanger, and
yeah.
people will all come back for more, wanting to. Yes, it's simple.
And of course,
And yeah,
it,
but
it,
it's I just thought it was a really interesting idea, and the story, the link to which will appear below, has a load of statistics that Julia has shared with us about just how powerful this is. So I stuck it in there because I just thought it was really interesting. It's one of those things thinking, of course, this is a success. Why
yeah,
have we not like talked about this before? And
yeah,
also, I
yeah.
think it is a different sort of emergent genre of content that takes what we've already talked about at our events and in the magazine and on the website. Just another step forward that will be really lucrative and exciting. Storytelling, like has been, I've made video interviews with people for a number of years in Barcelona and in Marbella with sort of how storytelling stuff, particularly in the Middle East, has always been quite a sort of popular content type. This has just sort of made it short, really punchy, and really compelling.
Yeah. Well, that it's fascinating, and the stats at the end of that piece talking about how in combination a subscriber would end up viewing the short form content for 90 minutes daily versus the most successful kind of Netflix type viewing figures, which suggest it's an hour daily. So,
Mm.
in combination, these kinds of this kind of content is actually engaging a consumer for 30% longer than what you would sort of the leading video on demand services. So I mean that's really a real wake-up call, isn't it, for people that have been that are selling content. And I suppose, the great news is, of course, people, that as we mentioned earlier, Marbella is coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and it's a trading floor for content as much as anything else. So, if you do have a subscriber base, if you do have access to some interesting markets, and you need to be marketing new and innovative content and services to that consumer or potential subscriber base, World Telemedia is where you need to be in order to start meeting those providers and leaving the show rich with new services to take into whichever market you happen to be targeting at this particular time. Paul, I'm going to leave it there, mate. Thank you very much. So we've talked about subscriptions, we've talked about red hot content, we've talked about ways of bundling that content and billing up and it all very good news stories for the telemedia industry. And we've also talked about the expanding world of payments. So I mean, one way or another, it does point towards the telemedia industry very much still representing that sort of sweet spot, I think, for digital content payments and advertising. I'm very much looking forward to seeing all of our good friends in Marbella, and hoping that people are going to continue to sign up over the next couple of weeks. Again, wtevent.com is where you can find out what's going on, schedule of events, and you can, of course, register. So, Paul, thank you very much for your time. I will
Always a
see
pleasure.
you in Marbella.
You will indeed. And yes, I think we're probably doing one of these immediately afterwards, so we
We
can
certainly will.
see what else comes out of it other than these really interesting stories. So great stuff. Yeah. See you all there.
So until next time, everybody, please remember to like us, subscribe, and we will see you in a couple of weeks' time, if not before, in sunny Marbella. So take it easy. Thanks, Paul. Cheerio.
Adios.